Her claim, her show, no document named, nobody charged with anything. Neil Sean told Fox News something completely different, that the couple are, in his phrasing, broke and busted, and he pinned the whole decision themselves and pointed out that living in the UK ticks one of the boxes deciding who qualifies for royal protection, and even a minor charity role ticks another one. 4 voices, 4 theories, 1 press team that briefed none of it. And I honestly can't stop thinking about the fact that all 4 of those theories, allegedly, point back to the same underlying pressure: money and safety, safety and money. That's not nothing, that's the entire architecture of the Sussex operation. If you've just tuned into the stream, here's where we are. Harry and Meghan announced a return to the UK, and a London tax expert publicly called the timing immaculate, because it lands on the exact month a 6-year residency clock expires. And what I'm about to tell you next is the part the palace really doesn't want circulating. If you're getting value out of this breakdown, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need to see what's really happening inside the firm. Because what comes next isn't rumor, it's a pattern. Now here's where the contradiction starts to emerge between what the Sussex camp was projecting publicly and what was reportedly happening behind closed doors at Montecito. Publicly, this is a story about a son reaching out to his ill father, about reconciliation, about a grandson wanting his children to know their grandfather before it's too late. And, honestly, that's hard to argue with. Any decent person hearing that framing understands the instinct. I understand that instinct too. But here's the thing. Behind that public frame, according to insiders describing the situation, sits a spreadsheet. A quiet, cold, unemotional spreadsheet with columns for tax exposure, protection cost, litigation risk, and brand rehabilitation, and the 2 forces pulling at this couple are not father and son. They're duty and finance, public narrative and private accounting, and whichever one wins, the other one has to be dressed up to look like the winner, and I understand the instinct to defend them here too, because the king is genuinely unwell, because reconciliation matters, because a 5-year silence is a heavy thing to carry into your 40s. But here's the thing, the ripple lands on people who didn't ask for any of this. It lands on William, who reportedly told a senior aide at Kensington Palace that he was not being consulted on the timing of the return, and that whatever arrangement was being negotiated, he wanted no part in the optics of it. It lands on Catherine, who palace observers say is trying to hold a fragile family Christmas together while quietly recovering. It lands on the 2 children in California, who, according to those close to the household, have been told a version of the move that centers a grandfather they barely know. And I'm curious, if you were sitting in William's position, would you have done the same thing? Let me know in the chat, I'm reading them. Because there's a scene, reportedly from a meeting at Clarence House earlier this year, that lands hard once you know the timeline. A senior auditor placed a slim folder on the table, nothing dramatic. A folder, on a table, and a longtime aide, according to those briefed on it, took off his glasses, set them down beside the folder, and asked whether the family truly understood what a return in August, rather than a return in June or October, actually meant on paper. Nobody in the room answered for a moment. That silence, insiders describe, said more than anything anyone rehearsed for the press. Quick catch-up for the new arrivals in chat. A London tax chief called the Sussex return timing immaculate because it aligns to the month a 6-year UK residency rule expires, and 4 contradictory explanations went public in a single day. Stay with me because the next part is where the story cracks open, and then there is the bill for the rest of us, because none of this is happening in a vacuum. Davies, who used to run the Royal Protection Command, went on the record and said the whole thing beggars belief and will cost many millions. And he put a number on the record that almost nobody else raised. Over 1,000 fixated persons currently identified inside this country, and, by his estimate, roughly 20% of them assessed as a genuine threat. That's not a tabloid figure. That's a former head of royal protection speaking about what actually walks the perimeter of Windsor and Kensington and Sandringham. And if that's true, then a private return with private security is not a private matter at all. It's a public safety calculation that reaches the Metropolitan Police, the Home Office, and eventually the taxpayer. So here's the scene that reportedly played out in a small room off a corridor at Windsor. A private secretary sat across from 2 officials, a single-page memo between them, And the question on the table was not whether Harry and Meghan could come home. Anyone can come home. The question was who pays for the ring of steel that follows them the moment they land. His voice rose, then stopped. She didn't retreat. He covered his face for a moment before answering. And then, according to those briefed on the exchange, he said something quietly that reframed the whole conversation. He said the family had already made this decision at a level above the room. That's a pretty remarkable admission from someone in that role. Because what it tells you is that the return was not a request being weighed, it was an outcome being managed. And honestly, if that moment gave you chills the way it gave me chills, hit that like button, because moments like this are exactly why this channel exists. And if you just clicked in, you picked the right moment, because this is where the story cracks open outward. Because once a return date leaks, the ripple moves fast. British tabloids ran the Blick-Rothenberg quote on their front pages within hours. American outlets picked up the Neil Sean framing about the couple's finances. Lady Colin Campbell's immigration claim traveled through the commentariat at a completely different speed, and Tom Sykes's protection and charity analysis anchored the more serious broadsheet coverage. 4 lanes. One story. And out at the gates of Windsor, according to palace observers, a small handful of handwritten notes appeared on the railings within days of the announcement. One of them, reportedly, was folded twice by a father who had brought his young daughter to see the castle, and the child had corrected one word on it in careful pencil before he tucked it into the ironwork. A photograph of Harry as a boy, pressed against someone's fingertips at the fence line, made it into a wire service image later that week. Older royal watchers, insiders describe, felt this was a family finally trying to close a wound before it was too late. Younger demographics online read it as a strategic financial move, dressed in a family story. And the truth is probably that both are happening at once, because both can be true. But here's the reframe that matters. This return, reportedly, wasn't taken to protect the relationship between a father and a son. It was taken to protect a portfolio, a residency status, and a future the Sussex household needs to build on British soil to survive the next decade. And I want to know from you in the chat, do you think the monarchy survives this shift, or is this the beginning of something the firm can't recover from? Type survives or can't recover. I'm reading them out. What this whole situation really illuminates is how thin the line is between love and logistics when you're born into an institution. Duty asks you to come home for the right reasons. Money asks you to come home on the right date. And sometimes those two things line up in a way that looks, from the outside, immaculate. That folder on the Clarence House table isn't going away. Somebody's going to open it again. And when they do, the version of this story the public was handed in August is going to look very different from the version written on the page inside. Before we wrap this one up, if you want the next update the moment it breaks, tap subscribe and turn on the bell, because with the way this is moving inside the palace, the next chapter might come sooner than anyone expects. And if you're still with me right now, drop one final like so the algorithm knows to keep pushing this to people who actually care about what's happening to the monarchy. I'll catch you in the next breakdown. So, Harry and Meghan just did something the palace insiders honestly thought they'd never do. They announced they're coming home, back to Britain, back inside the same borders they walked away from in March of 2020, with cameras chasing the car all the way to Heathrow. And the reason is honestly more calculated than anyone expected. Because we're not talking about a homesick prince who misses his father. We're not talking about a wife who suddenly fell in love with English drizzle and Windsor hedges. We're talking about a date on a calendar, a very specific date. A date that a London tax advisor looked at, ran the numbers on, and used one word to describe: immaculate. That's the word. Not lucky, not coincidental, immaculate. And there's a folder sitting somewhere, according to those briefed on the situation, that lays the whole timeline out on one page, and once you see that page, you can't unsee it. So stay with me on this one, because it's bigger than a homecoming. And if this hits the way I think it will, drop a like right now, so more people inside the royal watching community see this before the palace tries to bury it. And look, if you're just joining us here on Crown Watch, let me catch you up in 30 seconds, because this story is moving fast. Harry and Meghan have publicly said they're returning to the UK to be closer to King Charles during his illness. But a chief executive at a major London tax firm looked at the exact dates they left and the exact dates they're coming back, and the math lines up with a very obscure British tax rule almost no one talks about on television. On top of that, 4 completely different explanations for the return were floated in a single day, and not one of them matched what the Sussex press team briefed. Before we go deeper, I want to know where you stand. Type a 1 in the chat if you think Harry and Meghan are genuinely coming home for family reasons, or type a 2 if you think this is entirely financial. I'll read some of these out as we go. Alright, let's get back into it, because the next detail is the one that changed everything. So let's talk about what actually happened. Because when you lay the timeline out, the picture gets uncomfortable fast. The Sussexes left Britain in March of 2020, not April, not February, March, weeks, reportedly, before the UK tax year closed on the 5th of April. And that little detail sounds boring, but stay with me, because it's the key to everything. There's a rule in British tax law called temporary non-residence. Leave the country and come back inside 5 complete tax years, and the taxman treats you as though you never left in the first place. Every gain, every dividend, every share sale, every bit of income you thought you'd sheltered by living never happened. But stay away for 6 complete tax years, and you are clear, fully clear. Nimish Shah, chief executive of the tax firm Blick Rothenberg, walked through this on record, and used that one word, immaculate. The 6th tax year finished this April. They land back in Britain in August, and that's not even the strangest part. Because here's a small institutional footnote most people miss. A royal engagement is an official duty carried out on behalf of the monarchy, and where a working royal lives, and what charitable work they perform, ticks specific administrative boxes tied to protection, tied to status, tied to tax residency questions that go far beyond a passport stamp. So the return isn't just a return, it's a repositioning. And for anyone just landing on the stream, what we're unpacking right now is the possibility that the Sussex homecoming was timed to the exact month a 6-year British tax clock finished ticking. Stay with me because the next part is the one everyone's talking about. And once you understand that piece, what happened next makes a lot more sense, and a lot more disturbing. Because in a single 24-hour window, 4 completely different explanations for this move went out into the world, and none of them matched. Lady Colin Campbell said on her own show that she had been sitting on information since the 12th of August about a meeting with federal authorities in America over Harry's immigration paperwork. Her claim, her show, no document named, nobody charged with anything. Neil Sean told Fox News something completely different, that the couple are, in his phrasing, broke and busted, and he pinned the whole decision on the Daily Mail case Harry brought and lost. Then Tom Sykes read the court papers themselves and pointed out that living in the UK ticks one of the boxes deciding who qualifies for royal protection, and even a minor charity role ticks another one. 4 voices, 4 theories, 1 press team that briefed none of it. And I honestly can't stop thinking about the fact that all 4 of those theories, allegedly, point back to the same underlying pressure: money and safety, safety and money. That's not nothing. That's the entire architecture of the Sussex operation. If you've just tuned into the stream, here's where we are. Harry and Meghan announced a return to the UK, and a London tax expert publicly called the timing immaculate, because it lands on the exact month a 6-year residency clock expires. And what I'm about to tell you next is the part the palace really doesn't want circulating. If you're getting value out of this breakdown, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this reach more people who need to see what's really happening inside the firm. Because what comes next isn't rumor, it's a pattern. Now here's where the contradiction starts to emerge between what the Sussex camp was projecting publicly and what was reportedly happening behind closed doors at Montecito. Publicly, this is a story about a son reaching out to his ill father, about reconciliation, about a grandson wanting his children to know their grandfather before it's too late. And, honestly, that's hard to argue with. Any decent person hearing that framing understands the instinct. I understand that instinct too. But here's the thing. Behind that public frame, according to insiders describing the situation, sits a spreadsheet. A quiet, cold, unemotional spreadsheet